let's go straight to the biggest one, which hopefully doesn't fit. 0.3, it does fit. What we need to do is clean up these pistons and piston rings, because there is a bit of gunk in there in the piston ring grooves, just a little bit. Let me try and give you a better picture. Down in there you can see the black kind of crud that's sitting there. Yeah, so we want to get rid of that. Now, I was wrong earlier about these pistons. These pistons are the original ones that BMW sold with the car. Maybe they were updated for 1 year, but do you see how the oil rings, do you see how the oil holes here that allow oil to pass, they actually move those from there to right here. So what some people do is they drill these out a little bit to get better oil control. I'm debating doing that right now, because you just put another hole there and same on the other side. But because these are, I believe that they're balanced, I'm a little bit nervous about doing that, taking off too much material. I don't know if I have the right drill bit, but I'll think about it. Maybe putting in some holes in here. But it seems like this engine is not suffering from oil loss so much. It is burning some oil, but it's not like bad. So I'm gonna think about that. So I just want to show you guys a little bit about what I'm doing here. My weapons of choice have expanded a little bit here to a wire brush, small wire brush, a pick, tiny pick here, and I have these small steel brushes. They're super tiny. I originally bought these for another project. I thought they were a lot bigger, but they're like, you know, the size of your hand. These are also coming in handy. So I'm just gonna put piston 2 down because I've cleaned that one pretty well. The myth is that when your car's burning oil, and it's the rings that are the cause, you know, your rings can get stuck. Well, here, there is a ton of carbon in those ring gaps. And I know on my E90, my 325, that's definitely happened here. So as you can see, probably maybe because of the valve stem seals going bad, or the rings starting to go bad, you know, which piston was it? Piston 1, 2, and 3 were really bad, but piston 6 was not that bad. But still here we have the same amount, more or less the same amount of carbon buildup. So when cleaning these, so cleaning between the grooves here, my strategy here, let me take this oil ring off first. As you can see here, there's quite a bit of carbon in the grooves. I don't know if you guys can see that. There's quite a bit of built up carbon in there. What I'm doing is with my pick, because it's quite in there, is I'm gently scraping it away. Like that. Trying not to gouge anything in the second ring gap also. But the top ring gap is too small for my little pick here. My pick is tapers, and I can't actually get in that groove. So what I'm using is this fine steel brush to get in there, because it seems like the top ring is actually the worst. So the top ring is on either side of the crank pins here, not the crank pins, the connecting rod pins, what do you call these, has the most buildup, which is interesting. And now it kind of makes sense, because that's where they're putting the holes, the drainage holes on the new piston. On either side, well, all around the top pin. It's pretty corroded. So what I do is I go with the steel brush, go around the edge, scrape it all off. This one's going to take a bit longer. Then I hit it with some brake clean. And yeah, that's my process so far. And it's been working pretty well. So I'm thinking now that I'm seeing these pistons up close, the worse your valve stem seals get, the more you're burning oil. The more that you're burning oil, the more burnt oil gets stuck in between these ring gaps, right? Look at this corrosion on here. Sorry, not the corrosion, the burnt carbon. That also gets stuck in between your ring gaps. Maybe that's what's pushing the ring gaps out and wearing them out sooner. So if you have valve stem seals that are going, yeah, sure, you can get away with a liter of oil every 1,000 kilometers, but in the long run, what you're doing is you're wrecking your rings, and once your rings go, if a ring cracks, you know, your block's gone. So I know that I drove for quite a long time, maybe even a year, on my car before actually diving into this issue to try and fix the valve stem seals. Valve stem seals can lead to stuck rings, and stuck rings can lead to cylinder wall wear and or even crankcase failure if you run out of oil and you don't know, because these BMW digital gauges are terrible. They don't update regularly or as frequently, so you don't actually know how much oil you have until it's too late. If you have a valve stem seal problem, you know, I suggest that you get it fixed or get rid of the car, because you can only survive on it for so long. So we're on piston 4, and I've updated my technique a little bit. What we're doing is, first I'm hitting it, I've hit the other ones with this like oven cleaner stuff first. Then I'm using the pick to go through all the grooves. And once I feel satisfied with the cleanliness of the grooves, I'm using the smaller one to go across the top, which this one needs a little bit more work. Then I'm using this wire brush. You have to actually clean right here below the holes, just a little bit, just taking off that extra bit of carbon near the holes on either side, but not scratching the piston too much, just getting the carbon near the holes. And then on top, again using the oven cleaner, we're scraping the top of the piston with the harsher steel brush, like that. And then we're using a Scotch-Brite pad. This is just an old kitchen, what do you call this? A kitchen foam Scotch-Brite pad for cleaning dishes. And then you hit it with brake clean, everything. Clean everything off. And again, wipe it with the pad, and you have yourself a pretty decent looking piston. All clean and ready to get put back together. Whew. 2 more to go. Well, that worked out really well. Now that all the pistons are clean, the grooves are clean, the holes are clean, everything looks pretty good from my perspective. There's a little bit more there that I could get out. I'll go over these just one more time to make sure before I put the rings in. We're gonna now turn our attention to the block. I'm going to start to clean off this old gasket material. All right, so today, it's another day in the garage. Today we're going to be putting together the piston rings for our N52 engine. Cleaned up all the bearings. I've cleaned up the, what I mean is, I've cleaned up the pistons a bit. So now they're all clean and ready to get put back together. But we have our piston rings here. I bought some OE replacement Molle piston rings. Where's the part number? There's the part number. I would go to realoem.com and just search up which ones you need. Again, if you open up the box, what you get is a top ring, middle compression ring, an oil, the middle kind of oil part, and then 2 rings that go around the oil, this oil ring part. So you get, technically you get 5 pieces, and each box is about $25. Original OE equipment, $25–30. So what we need to do is one by one go piston by piston and gap these correctly in the block. So for the top ring, if you remember from my other videos, it's 0.18 to 0.33 millimeters, I think, and the middle ring, the middle compression ring, is 0.3 to 0.5 millimeters. So we want to get it as close to 0.3 as we can. Sorry, 0.18 for this one and 0.3 for this one. So the oil rings you can't measure, but what you can do is just make sure that they're not binding. There is a bit of a gap there on the piston rings, but you don't have to measure that gap. Just make sure they're not like overlapping or anything like that. So let's get started with the first compression ring. I don't know why A is, I know that you put these together, that's right. You do put this one on first, this middle oil ring. Where's my other oil rings? Anyway, they look like this. I've kind of taped these together, but you put this one on first. Then you put on the 2 oil rings that go on top of this, one. Then you put your middle one on, and then you put your top one on. So I'm gonna first measure this. I'm gonna measure them in reverse, and we kind of do the same thing as before when we were measuring the piston ring gap with the worn out ones, which are now here. So let's get started. By the way, I'm still waiting on parts for my broken valve here. It's been, I don't know, 5 days now. It should be here in a few days. So if you're interested in figuring out how to, or learning how to rebuild N52 top end cylinder head, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell for notifications, and that will be up eventually when I get all of this done and yeah, ready to go. So let's start here with piston 1. As you can see, the pistons are nicely bored from before. Nice cross hatching pattern. I measured them again, and there's really little wear. This just kind of prepares the surface. It doesn't actually like bore it or grind it or anything. I didn't notice any wear, even to a thousandth of an inch, thousandths of a millimeter, whatever the bore gauge measurement is. Couldn't see any difference between boring it using that flex hone. By the way, if If you're interested in that video, I'll link it below. So here, what we're gonna do is I'm gonna open up this piston ring. Do I have scissors? Wow, these piston rings look way better than the other ones. It has a number here on the top, 11767098. I'm gonna look that part number up. There's no other markings on it, and there's an E. There's an E up here. So I'm gonna assume this is the top. I'm gonna read that right now and check which side goes up. Okay, well, I'm gonna assume that the E marking means that that's the top part, but I'm not sure. I mean, for the top ring, it doesn't matter. For the middle ring, there's a little groove on it. So here we put the piston in, try to get it as level as possible. You can use a different, just try to get this as level as possible. I use the top of the piston, you can use something else. And then our measurement, if you remember, is for the top ring, here, 0.18 to 0.33. So it has to be in between these two. So I'm gonna just do 0.18 first. Wow. First glance, it didn't fit, but it fits perfect. Let's go straight to the biggest one, which hopefully doesn't fit. 0.3, it does fit. So 0.33, that's kind of disappointing. 0.35, 0.38. So between 0.35, let's grab 0.35 and... Okay, well this is quite interesting because this is a brand new piston ring. The gap should be 0.018 to 0.18 to 0.33. But unfortunately, that's not the case. So either my feeler gauge is lying to me, which I'm going to show you how you can check that, or my bore gauge was lying to me because it said my bore was straight, or the piston rings are not good. So let's investigate a little bit right now. So the first thing I'm going to do is go grab that 0.35 millimeter, and I have my calipers here. I'm going to zero it out. Let's turn it off, turn it on. Zero it out. We're going to measure here. And it is right, 0.34, 0.35, 0.34. So it's actually smaller. Okay. And that just fits, 0.34. So literally, we're about 0.1 millimeter off. So I'm just gonna say, that's good to go. That's not the best, that this is already out of spec that we're putting in. But, I guess manufacturing processes, it is what it is. So let's keep moving on. Let's move on to the middle ring. Okay, so the middle ring, you may not be able to see this. Let's see. You may not be able to see this, but if you grab the ring, the middle ring, there's a little T on it. It's a little step. And you want to make sure that that little step is actually facing down. Now on this one, this is number 1768690. There is a little marking that says M top, or I should say E top or M top. I'm guessing that means it's the top. So just remember that there's a little step in the ring, and that step you need to put facing downward. So let's grab the piston. Looks good. Even all, check using this. How far down is this? Twenty-one. I mean, it's the same height, so perfect. Now we grab our feeler gauge, wherever that went, and we're looking for 0.3 to 0.5. So let's just go with the biggest, 0.5. Doesn't fit. Let's go 0.4. Doesn't fit. Let's go 0.3. And it slots in there. So this one is set, 0.3. That's good to know. This one is in spec. And now we have the oil rings. The 2 oil rings. I'm just going to place them inside just to make sure that they're not binding or overlapping on each other, and that there is a little bit of a gap. And I can see there is a little bit of a gap, and compared to the old one, it is about the same. I remember it being about 0.8 or something like that. Let's see. Yeah, about 0.8. So that one's good. This one's also good. And here's the replacement middle part. There's a little blue marking there, and it's kind of hard to see, but imagine if this was also like a T, and this was flat. This part here you'll see has a little bit of an indentation where the 2 rings are supposed to connect onto. So one will go on one side on top of this one, and one will go on the other side on top of that one. And it is kind of hard to see, but there's a little groove there that allows the ring to sit on, and it's on either side. So I'm assuming this is multi-directional. Anyway, let's put it in here. See what's going on. And also this one fits. This one also fits just right, so that's good. All right, so we got our piston rings all measured up. We have the oil upper in the middle. We're going to grab our first piston. Now the instructions say you should put this one on first, the middle oil ring, because these 2 again lock it down against the piston. So just be gentle putting this onto the middle groove. Make sure the grooves are all cleaned, and that sits in there nicely. Yeah. And then now it says to use one of these ring pliers. but let's try it. But I think for this one, we just use our hands. This thing is super weird. Yeah, maybe I'll just use my hands. I just launched this ring halfway to Timbuktu. So yeah, guys, it's really important to be very careful with your rings. So you don't break them. I mean, I guess I could use for the oil ring, I could just use an older one, but I'm just gonna try this with my hands. I put this on the bottom first, I think it says in the instructions. Well, that one felt like slotting in on the top, so that's fine. I'll just put this one in from the bottom. That one's in. And now you need to make sure that these two rings are opposite of each other. I think it says like 120 degrees from each other or 180 degrees from each other. So I'm gonna just turn this one to be, sorry, let me rephrase. There's an opening there, there's an opening there, and the middle ring opening also has to be 120 degrees from that one. So one will be here, one will be here, one will be here, if that makes sense. So just turn the rings. All right, now that we have the oil rings on there, we're going to use this ring compressor. All right, I figured out how to finally use these. I had to Google it. There we go. Ledge is down. Let's put the top one on. Now I'm gonna face this number and the M, the Male M on top as well. I mean, this piston ring spreader is terrible. I think something's wrong with mine. I'm just gonna put this one on by hand. All right, put the last one on by hand, and there you have it. You want to put these piston rings 180 degrees apart from each other. So I'm doing that now. And let's move on. Let's move on to the next one.
Years later.
All right, so I found something interesting. You know how you may be wondering now why we're back at cylinder 1. Well, you know how cylinder 1, the top ring was out of spec by just a little bit. Well, on cylinder 4, it was super tight. I don't remember exactly how much, but it was tighter than the rest, the other 4 pistons. So what I'm doing now is actually taking that ring and putting it into piston 1, and let's measure and see how big it is. So this is as big as we can go, 0.33, and it's too tight, and that's a good sign for us. So let's go 0.3. No, too tight. Let's go 0.28. Still too tight. Let's go 0.25. So 0.25 fits. 0.28 is too big. So between 0.25 and 0.28, this one is now within spec. So I'm going to measure piston number 1. I'm going to go take the top compression ring off piston number 1 and test it in number 4 and see if that's a better fit for this. So if I was you, I would actually write down your numbers. If you remember this sheet from before, I have our old numbers here on the left in pencil, and I'm writing in a different color the numbers on the right. This number was out of spec, while this one was a bit tight, or tighter than the rest so far. So I'm gonna swap those out, and we'll measure piston number 1 in piston number 4. All right, let's see this. So maybe, I don't know what's going on. Let's see, let's just go straight to the max, 0.33. That fits. 0.35. That fits. 0.38 does not fit. So I think it is just the piston ring. I mean, this one is now, 0.34. So it was, the bore sizes are the same. The ring size is just a bit out of spec. So now that the piston ring gaps are all done, we're going to be putting the engine back together, and we're going to start working on the cylinder head because we got our valve in the mail. So if you're interested in following along on how to rebuild an N52 cylinder head, I mean, there's literally no other videos on the internet about this. Consider subscribing to the channel and following me on social media to get some updates on how my build progress is going. Don't forget to tag me on Instagram with your own builds. I'm interested in seeing how yours are going. Thanks so much for watching, and I hope to see you guys in the next video.